Welcome, everyone. My name is Tristan Roberts. I'm hosting this webinar. I'm very excited to be here with Angela. We talked about the pronunciation of your last name, but then I just went like, um,
Iraldi, whatever we're
Angela
feeling.
Iraldi of Skanska, Allison Crossley of Cumming Group, and Alfmina Mizrahi of the New York Climate Exchange. Um, and I am hosting this webinar as on behalf of Metricore. Metricore is an new online gathering place for sustainability practitioners that offers free Lead V5 forums, expert Q&A, member vault resources, much more. You can connect with other sustainability pros on any topic. If you're not already part of it, I'm going to send you a link in the chat, an invite link that's free to get started with. But that's all you'll hear from me as a host sponsor. I'm now going to turn it over to our panel. I'm really excited to hear from them about this project. If you have Q&A, you can kind of drop your Q&A in the chat at any time. We're definitely in the last 10 minutes of the hour. We're gonna focus on Q&A, so you can save it up for then as you wish. So thank you to our panel, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tristan. Thank you for those intros and for hosting us today. And thank you all for joining us today. We are super excited to share with you our presentation from Pilot to Planet, New York Climate Exchange Scales Sustainable Innovation, where we will be using our New York Climate Exchange project as a case study for accelerating climate solutions. Tristan already mentioned, but my name is Angela Iraldi. I'm with Skanska. We are the construction managers for the project, and I am a senior sustainability manager with Skanska, supporting our teams on an array of sustainability services and support. Elifmina, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, happy to be here with everybody. My name is Elifmina Mizrahi. I'm the capital project manager here at the New York Climate Exchange, working with our amazing teams to design, develop, and ultimately construct our campus on Governor's Island, where hopefully we can have another session like this in person in a couple of years.
Great, I'll go next. I am Allison Crossley, work for Cumming Group. We're an owner's representative firm. Today on this presentation, I acted as owner's rep to Elifmina, but I'm really going to stand in for the architect SOM and kind of give perspective to the processes that we put in place through the project. The last thing I wanted to say is that if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat and we'll get to them at the end. Elifmina, over to you.
Yeah, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of sort of the process of design and, construction feasibility analysis and all that, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce the New York Climate Exchange to you all. I think most people here are, from the built environment sustainability world, so a lot of what we're going to talk about in the presentation you're probably familiar with, but our organization is a relatively new organization. We were founded in 2023, so you may not be familiar with us. We're a nonprofit organization that has a sort of unique partner model that we're using to fight against the climate crisis that we're facing right now. And our motto is sort of that collaboration across sectors is really important to solve the challenges ahead. And we're also building a physical space for that collaboration to take place. And today's presentation is really about the physical space, the campus. It's on Governor's Island. And I think we can maybe move to the next slide just to show you guys sort of the partner network. We're anchored by Stony Brook University. So we were originally sort of founded out of an RFP process that the city put out to develop some land on Governor's Island, and Stony Brook led this large coalition of organizations in responding to the RFP that the city put out, and was the winner. So we were born in about April 2023, and since then we've been working diligently with our incredible, design, engineering, and construction team to really think through how to build this campus on the island. And so Um, Maybe just a brief note about what will happen inside the building. We really we've already started our programming and I hope that you sort of connect with me afterwards or check out our website to join some of our events. But once the campus is built, we'll have sort of three focus areas that will be activating the inside of this building. So urban resilience, climate data, and climate finance are the three focus areas for the organization because you really sort of most of the climate impacts are being sort of felt in cities. Uh, a lot of the people are living in cities. A lot of the innovation comes from cities. So urban resilience is a big piece. We're based in New York City, and then you of course need the data and the finance element to really scale any solution in this world. So that's where we stand right now. For those of you not familiar with Governor's Island, it's a small island right off the tip of Lower Manhattan, right across from Brooklyn in the middle of New York Harbor. The only way to get there is a ferry. So it's a very unique place because there are no cars. It used to be a military base, so it was closed to the public for a number of years. And over the last sort of 2 decades, the city has really opened it up to New Yorkers and visitors to become a sort of center for innovation, a center for exploration, and the future vision for the island is that it is a center for climate solutions, and it really positions New York City as a place to lead the charge there. I think, this is our amazing team, Angela and Allison are our representatives of two of the firms here. MNLA, MNLA is our landscape architect and Burr Huppold and Lang and our engineers. Just want to shout everybody out because everybody's work is so amazing on this. Just quickly about our project scope. So we have two large-scale commercial mass timber buildings that we are constructing. And then we also are doing the sort of renovation of one of the historic structures that currently sits abandoned on the island. And one of our new construction buildings will be really this center for collaboration and convening and the exchange of ideas and solutions. And while the other is a sort of research and education hub with classrooms and labs and demonstration spaces, exhibition spaces. And then we're building a sort of a suite of dorms and studio apartments to house undergraduate students, graduate students, and researchers on the island. So really trying to create a sort of exchange between people who are in school, people who are practitioners, researchers, the general public. So I think most of our presentation today will be focused on sort of four key ways we are scaling climate solutions. But if you go back to the previous slide, I just wanted to show, we are doing quite a lot. You can take this, then you can take a screenshot, whatever, but we don't want to sort of we don't have time to go through all of these things. So we're going to be specifically focusing on some key items, but it's just to say that the innovation of this campus is that we are trying to tackle multiple things at once. And I think the next slide on certifications really makes that point where, we're doing Living Building Challenge and True Zero Waste and the Waterfront Edge Design Guidelines, which really creates a sort of holistic approach to building an example of what urban resilience could look like or what regional resilience could look like at the waterfront. And so, yeah, the most of the presentation today will be focused on LBC, but we are also, it's just part of the puzzle for us. We're doing a couple other ones. Um, and yeah, here we can quickly just tick through these. These are some renderings of our project. We sit right at the pier that you will arrive to the island. This is that convening space, the collaboration space that I talked about. Our building is made out of mass timber. So one thing we always like to say is that if you're in the convening space and it feels like you're on the 53rd Street, Sheraton in Midtown Manhattan, we didn't do a good job. So same with engaging public, the sort of ground level and the public that might be on the island that might not know anything about us but we want sort of a porous ground floor to be able to engage folks who are just visiting the island, and hopefully we can entice them to stay a little longer. This is that academic sort of courtyard. What you see here is a historic structure that would be renovated, and inside, this used to be army barracks, and so inside it'll be student housing and sort of communal spaces for student life. Um, and yeah, the sort of this is a nice hero shot that I like because it shows this resilient waterfront that we're building. It'll be the first place on the island that breaks through the existing seawall that's there. So we're really, we're not gonna solve sea level rise with this patch of land here, but we want to be an example of what development might look like at the waterfront. You'll see here the steps. We are elevating the campus to 18 feet above sea level. So, we're hoping to build a structure that's resilient over the next many decades to come. I think this is the last slide of the intro. I'm sorry. This has probably already taken up too much time, but it's always so fun to talk about our organization and our campus. But really, sort of what we're here to talk about today is how we move from some of the goals and visions that our organization may have to action. And really, I'd say the New York Climate Exchange is focused on three sort of goals. One is to drive innovation, scale climate solutions. Two is to really do it in a replicable way. We don't want to be scaling things and be the only one standing on the other side. We want others to follow the path that we're forging. So creating a replicable way to do it is really, really key. And then also inspiring and educating. I think this really builds off of what the energy of Governor's Island already is. You have to take a ferry there. When you arrive with a sense of accomplishment, like you made the boat, you sort of didn't miss the journey there, and then you arrive there, and it's like a portal that, you arrive there with your heart and mind open, I think. And so we want to tap into that energy and really use this building to inspire and educate people about what is possible. And so we're going to be talking about, a couple of the ways that we bring those goals to action.
I can take it from here.
Yeah, why don't you go through this since you're representative of the design team?
Yeah, so the first thing I'll say before I even get into the slide is it's rare in my 10, maybe now 12, 13 years of experience to have a client that doesn't add on sustainability, like it's their core mission. So we got to really, how does the design and the construction of the campus help scale climate solutions? That was like our main design driver through every selection, the programming, the materials, the location, the certifications that we went after. This was all geared towards this question. So the meat and potatoes of our presentation is going to be broken down by 4 different sections: mass timber, LBC requirements, innovations log, and of course the sustainable solutions challenge. Let's jump in with the mass timber, Angela.
Perfect. Thanks, Allison and Elifmina. So starting with mass timber. So for this project, mass timber was never really an option from like a list of building systems. It was really the option from day one. The material aligns with the mission of the exchange. We know that it's sustainable. It's also healthy and beautiful. And while New York City is, really a global leader in construction and engineering, it's really lagged behind other cities and countries in adopting the use of this material. So that presented an opportunity that also aligned with the mission of the exchange around really educating and inspiring people around sustainable solutions and helping scale them here in New York City. So we really wanted to take a lead in helping New York City catch up with respect to mass timber, and ideally be a leader going forward. Some design considerations were definitely discussed up front with mass timber. So considerations that were prioritized with the use of mass timber were really around circular building design as well as optimizing people's experience with the material. So thinking about designing key assemblies for future disassembly, helping to extend the life of building components and reduce waste, hopefully ultimately at the end of the building's useful life. And then if you click to the next slide.
The one more thing I will say is that the less is more was another one of our design principles of like, let's let the material that we're selecting with intention to shine, which is why these renderings are so heavy on the mass timber versus, and you see there's like there's no drop ceilings. Like we will have some of those for code compliance, but we're really letting the material speak.
Yeah. Yeah, and then, at the same time, the team really sought to maximize people's experience with the material, as I mentioned, like creating these like ground floor views of mass timber, allowing occupants and visitors to really connect visually with the warmth of the wood. Just quickly, I know this whole presentation is around innovation, but mass timber, alone isn't super innovative. It's widely used around the world as a climate solution, and Skanska has built several mass timber buildings here in the US and in Europe. But, what the innovation here is, again, New York City doesn't really allow for mass timber at scale. So the innovation work here is really working through those regulatory hurdles of actually building mass timber in New York City. I won't get into all the specifics here, but New York has a very conservative building code related to mass timber. So I'll give some examples in just a minute, but just wanted to note that this was kind of the crux of what we were solving for when we engaged with something called the New York City EDC Mass Timber Design Studio. So the Mass Timber Design Studio you can go to the next slide, Allison, is a program facilitated by New York's Economic Development Corporation and other partners, and it's really grounded in commitment to advancing mass timber adoption in New York City through demonstration and technical innovation, public outreach, and structured engagement with regulators. So through the studio, we were able to engage directly with city agencies, designers, other partners to really navigate the complexities of New York City's permitting and regulatory framework for heavy timber construction. So, this provided direct coordination, strengthened coordination with Department of Buildings, with the fire department. Again, really trying to advance practical solutions to implementing mass timber. And I think one of the things that we came away with was, greater regulatory clarity and technical confidence from a lot of these conversations. Most of what was discussed in the studio really related to two key regulatory components. So again, the New York City code requirements kind of above and beyond IBC code requirements, and also the code's what's called Chapter 33 safeguards during demo and construction, which essentially is how you can build in New York City with specific requirements for timber construction. So, kind of three major areas of focus came out of this for further discussion, and I'll run through just a couple quick examples. So just to mention a few, the first being with regard to stair towers. So our project has taken like a hybrid approach where the building structure and the stair towers are integrated with one another. However, code typically requires these stair towers to be constructed independently. So this is something that the project team is continuing to work with Department of Buildings to discuss in the hopes that, a hybrid approach supporting a more, sustainable structure overall can be pursued. Next example is related to temporary protection of connections. So as written, code requires that each connection be fire protected at the end of each work shift. So this would be like fireproofing, every steel connection daily if this was a steel building. So obviously something that presents significant constructability and sequencing challenges So this was certainly a discussion point throughout the studio of how to approach this practically. And this is something that we're, working through with the design team, and ongoing coordination again with DOB and fire department. And then the last thing I'll mention is related to the storage of timber. So again, as the code is written now, it only allows for storage of up to 1,900 cubic feet of lumber stored on site. So this is basically 2 trailers at any given time. This is a particularly tall hurdle because we're on an island. So, that already limits delivery flexibility and increases logistical complexity. So again, discussing this issue, explaining potential approaches to sequencing, staging, temporary protection, and we're hoping for some further clarification as we progress with the project.
And I just want to just double click on what you said around like coming out of this process with practical solutions. I think one thing that has been clear time and time again is that for this general status quo developer to pick the sustainable option, it has to be practical, it has to be cost effective. Like we cannot have all these complicated rules that make building in mass timber so expensive that nobody in their right mind would then build mass timber. So I think that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to de-risk, and make it economically viable to use some of these things that may be innovative only to this region or maybe innovative in general.
Great point, Elfmina. So I'm going to go into the LBC requirements, and specifically what is our project profile on LBC, and then how did we approach it innovatively. So this is a big chart. We have 3 main projects. It's the south building, north building, and adaptive reuse. We are pursuing South Building full living building challenge. We won't be able to get the water pedal, but we are still pursuing all of the imperatives without the water pedal. We weren't able, our site isn't big enough to do a wastewater treatment, and we felt like because we are on an island, hopefully the island will choose that technology in the future. So we do have, it is plumbed for that future hookup if that ever becomes available. The north and south, or the north and the adaptive reuse is core certified. And then the overall site, of course, is true and wedge. So dropping down one level of like what's scalable and what's innovative, the LBC pursuit was, what is the biggest environmental offender in the construction industry today? I can remember sitting in that meeting and Andrew and Elfmina like giving this question to our architect and them being like, we like this, like let's go back and really, because for many years, probably for a decade, carpet has been like the thing that I think our industry has like attached itself as like a huge win, but like what's the next product, so we challenged SOM with that question. And this is what they came back with of what is the biggest offender: site, building, interiors. They're like, we got to like do this beyond the site, looking at the interiors, looking at carbon footprint, and as well as the health, right? Because LBC is very heavy on red list free materials. So for site, we came back with concrete paving and water usage. Buildings, of course, steel structure, concrete floor slabs, glazing exterior envelope, and then of course interiors is excess assemblies, rapid replacement, and chemicals. Those were like the biggest offenders from these 3 categories. Their proposed solutions is low carbon concrete, which is not necessarily an innovative product. Over the last couple of years, we've seen different iterations, which we will get into. One of those, waterfront bioconcrete, and then no plant irrigation. Not innovative, but still something that to really like hold on to. Buildings, mass timber, slabs, highly insulated building envelope, and then of course simple natural materials, durable assemblies, and we had to remove the red list products from the building. So our transparency beyond a typical product info. So this was like anybody that has done an LBC project, the materials we as a team always said that we had like an 8 different sided Rubik's Cube. How are we going to solve this by meeting the red list free, by making sure that we had declare labels, by living product challenge. And then on top of that, our client is asking for innovation. So we have spoken hundreds of conversations with manufacturers. This has been a very collaborative, and advocacy has been hit hard for this project. And again, I don't think that's innovative, but I think the level in which we went to bat to make sure that manufacturers knew what we were looking for is the part where the exchange is like, yes, go one step further so that we can make this easier for other project teams. So just to give you an idea of what the numbers look like, for red list compliant, we had about 1,000 products. We had to avoid 90% of red list chemical classes within our building. So you can see, you can take a screenshot and look at this later. The compliant side, the non-compliant side, we're still working through that even after CDs, just to figure out what can we do to make sure that we're really meeting that 90% threshold. Responsible wood sourcing. This is the mass timber FSC certified. We broke it down by building. This was a little bit easier because, again, all of the people on this call has been doing the work to for LEED especially, probably requesting those chain of custody certificates. So this is not as fancy. This, though, is where really it's so small that you don't need to read it. But you can see all of the different products and the cost drivers that were pushing a yay or nay on if we could afford it, if it came within schedule, and then it met our requirements for LBC. We have done a lot of vetting, an iterative process with Skanska. At one point, I think they were pulling out their hair because we were like, can you price this innovative product? But this is all to say that the iterative process was necessary in order to get to a building that does hold innovation of products. So the last big part of this is specification directive. To write an open source spec, which I think hasn't really been done for LBC. And if anyone's on the call that you've done an open source spec, please raise your hand because we'd love to talk to you. But to have multiple products that comply with LBC requirements is tough. It's really tough. But we also want to have an open source spec. So we had performance. We had to really hone in our directive. So all materials listed in the specification will be at least vetted for LBC compliance for the first 4. Living sourcing, which is where the location is, was not necessarily vetted at this point in time. The second layer was products that are compliant at minimum will be carried at the basis of design. So this is where possible, there were alternates listed, but at least the basis of design was vetted and compliant. And then products that are compliant with exception, which is determined by the LBC rating system. We will have 3 of those products listed, and we'll do the due diligence on the backside with Skanska and the subconsultant. And I guess this, I'll put a bow on this, is that the magnitude of vetting products and innovation was a big push of the design team. But I think when you work together, especially with a contractor that is so willing to support that effort of pricing and balancing the cost and the schedule, it really can work.
And I'll just add really quickly, Allison, because I know we
Please.
can talk about specs all day, but
Yeah.
I just want to reiterate, a lot of this vetting obviously happens on the design side, but it's the CM's responsibility to really advise on building out the contract docs so that we can successfully procure the products that we want, enforce the sustainability requirements, as well as making sure that we're creating a project that is financially viable
Correct.
and competitive.
Correct.
So
Yeah. Okay, so innovations log, salvage materials, experimental materials. This is you, Angela.
yes, perfect. Okay, so speaking to material vetting and sustainability requirements in the contract docs, but kind of moving beyond the LBC requirements, the next innovation pathway we outlined is really around the project's innovations and what we're calling experimental materials tracking process. Including a focus on circularity and salvage. So, given the mission of the exchange, pushing innovation was at the forefront of the project from the very beginning. And I will say it's remained a core focus of the project, regardless of budget. So this is just a small snapshot of one of our tracking docs, but the point is the project was really intentional about soliciting feedback and ideas from everyone involved. And we talked through and we tracked all of these different strategies related to energy, water, materials, education, et cetera, to really see what would be possible to incorporate or showcase in this project. So circularity was definitely a priority for this project, and two areas the team focused on were circularity kind of at a regional level and then circularity at a site level. So an idea that Skanska brought forward early on was the potential for material reuse via deconstruction from another project of ours actually going on in Manhattan that we were demoing. So you'll see on the left-hand side, that's the existing building. It's a whole city block that's coming down. And we really wanted to put forward a good faith effort to try to demonstrate deconstruction and reuse at scale. So we went through these feasibility exercises. We toured the existing buildings. We put together some proposed salvage plans. I will say, full transparency, ultimately the team did not move forward with using materials from this project due to a few things. Mostly misaligning demo and construction schedules, lack of storage, some other things. But, the exercise provided really valuable lessons for the entire team about the logistical and market challenges involved in material recovery and reuse. So it really helped us lean even farther into salvage opportunities and other materials that we could maybe more feasibly implement on the project. So if you go to the next slide, maybe just
the other thing I wanted to say, Angela, we also, by doing this exercise, even though there was a misalignment, we got industry experts also involved to show them that, hey, as clients, as construction managers, we want this. So if you can provide a more seamless approach, whether that be storage or helping us solve the timeline difference, that it's the biggest restrictor of this type of salvage material reuse.
Yeah,
we would be more willing to do this type of stuff. So I think that, again, that conversation, being the first to try to not the first, but to join the conversation to push this along is again, trying to get the pilot to the planet scale that we're looking for.
totally.
And that's really sort of something that I think it's the government's responsibility. I would pose it's the government's responsibility to come up with a regional solution or tackle it at a regional scale, which is what Angela was talking about earlier with the mass timber studio. There, New York City decided, okay, mass timber regulatory issues, we're not going to solve project by project. We're going to have a framework, a process, something that's organized to deal with it at a regional scale. So here we just need a similar approach from the New York City region to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just very briefly at the site level, continuing on the circularity conversation, finding ways to reuse existing trees for furniture and materials from the existing seawall on site as landscape or furniture. And I'll say the project team really explored salvage opportunities kind of beyond, just targeting a few materials, right? We really did take a holistic approach to integrating salvage and these experimental materials throughout the project, which required close collaboration, as Allison was kind of hinting at, across the team, right? And really, truly an iterative process to evaluate the different options, refine the strategies, align the decisions with our project goals, and really working to balance our sustainability ambitions, right, with cost considerations and overall design intent. Um, Something besides salvage that we worked through was around experimental materials. And the exchange and Allison were really kind of pivotal in pushing forward these efforts. So how can we look at incorporating these different materials as a way to showcase emerging technologies and really forward-looking climate solutions within the project, and really try to create opportunity to demonstrate how these new materials can, obviously help reduce, some sort of environmental impact, but also support the project goals and position the project as kind of like a testing ground for scalable strategies that could inform future development. So
Yeah, because what we see with sometimes experimental materials, they don't have the performance criteria that high use spaces really need. And so I think that that's the approach, is like you can't sacrifice performance for something that's more environmental in on some scale, right? So this is like what's the biggest offender and how do we still meet performance and budget through that?
yeah, and then as we worked through these exercises, they kind of had to be completed through the materials vetting lens of LBC, which also really helped shape how materials were evaluated and selected. So like again, trying to like push innovation, but also like aligning with all of the other kind of, certification frameworks and other requirements. So we could just flip quickly through a couple examples. These are just some screenshots of the different materials that we evaluated as part of this experimental pricing kind of evaluation and pricing exercise. So this is just a couple. So there's window shades. We worked through insulation, furniture, flooring, a lot of the other, resilient flooring, interior, and building materials here. So, okay.
You're up, Elifmina.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about our last sort of innovation pathway. As you've heard from both Angela and Allison, we've already tasked both the design and the construction team with, bringing in innovation in every little possibility that they can. But just in case there was some sort of, scalable solution that we haven't yet crossed path with through our mandates for our construction and design team, we, as the exchange, sort of partnered with our programming team to come up with this open call, really, for companies who have breakthrough technologies in energy, water, waste, and materials to submit their ideas to this open challenge. And we got about 100 or so, a little bit over 100 applications. 44 of those applications were from New York City region, which was exciting for me because I live here, but also, for the exchange because we want to be able to support local economies, whether that's jobs, innovators here, businesses. We really want this to be the center for sort of that climate innovation piece. So seeing those 44 applicants from New York City really got me excited. But that means half of the applications were from outside of New York City. So that was pretty exciting too. I think we can sort of move on to the next slides. The other numbers we sort of I get into in more detail in the next slides. But one sort of key piece of our open call was that, earlier I mentioned this sort of coalition of partners that the exchange has. This was really a way for us to tap into the knowledge and expertise of that coalition and be able to bring sort of a dialogue between different sectors between different experts from different areas and, evaluate the solutions that were submitted to us through the lens of our partners. So, both Allison and Angela were reviewers for us, which was amazing. We had some other folks from our capital project team. We had facilities folks from our university partners. We had investing sort of investors or the lens of investing, and it really was a sort of exciting challenge for the exchange to prove the proof of concept of like, when you bring different industries together, does something, better come from it than if we're all siloed? And I think sort of talking about the winners, I think the next couple slides talk about sort of the finalists, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, sorry, before I move on to the finalists, one important thing, speaking earlier, you heard Allison speak about the specs and specifications and how important, some of the considerations there were. One of the key considerations when we did this open call was, okay, at what point of the project schedule or timeline do we do such an open call that we could feasibly, reasonably incorporate the winners into our specifications, into our basis of design, because we don't want to do an open call when it's quote unquote too late. So part of what our programming team was focused on is really challenge me and challenge Andrew, my what it for which kinds of technologies is it already too late, i.e. the design has already progressed too much. And so we were really conscious of this dynamic of timing and when specs are written and things like that. Um, and I'll go through this, briefly, but we had sort of a range of applicants from a whole bunch of things. Of course, energy was a big one given, the state of affairs of the world, waste, water, and building materials. I think those were the top. And then there was some more interesting, exciting things for engagement, some pilots for air quality monitoring, some gamified solutions, things like that. Um, and at the end, we ended up from about 150, 105 applicants. We selected about 20 finalists, and we put them in two cohorts because, again, we were really focused on this issue of timing. So we felt like six or so of the finalists were in this like urgent category, I would say, that we called not urgent, but materials, because we were in the process of like writing the specs for the project, and we felt like these are ones that currently feel relevant to where the project timeline is. And then we had a sort of cohort two finalist that was really a sort of pipeline, I guess, for the exchange to be able to work with moving forward, because these were more operations things that were sort of becoming future energy ready, but maybe code regulations don't allow batteries yet, but it's a battery related technology, or, it's something that we could have a pilot of once we are operational, but at this moment in time, you know, it's not that we're selecting the material for this tile and this would be a good company. So from all of those finalists, we actually have, yeah, here you can see the finalists. Let me do a shout out to them because they're the innovators here actually. These are the cohort one finalists, the materials. And four of these are in our specs and our basis of design. Two of them were a bit too early stage for our teams after their evaluation to really get comfortable putting into the basis of design. But I think we're sort of hopeful that, as the project moves through construction, we're going to be able to sort of do some, you know, adjustments later on when the product is a little bit further developed. And then the next slide was cohort two finalists. Here you see operations, future energy needs, special pilot projects. One of the things, is that in New York City is a conservative construction market. And so, they're hesitant with mass timber and they're even more hesitant with batteries inside mass timber buildings and things. So some of these, the yellow labeled ones, when it had to do with some energy storage, we were not able to move forward with them at the time, but we still want to continue highlighting their technology and working with them in the future when regulations get up to speed. Yeah, we had a finalist showcase at Climate Week 2025 about a year ago. There were finalist presentations, there was an industry panel, there was tabling, and we also gave a tour. It was a really fun sort of industry event. I think most of our team was there too, which was great. And I think I just want to sort of round us out with briefly touching on this sort of pilot that came out of this sort of solution. Yeah, here you have the renderings of like where these would be integrated. But I think the sort of more exciting thing to talk about here is that one of our finalists was an algae-based green concrete sort of mix, and last summer or towards the end of the summer, we did an on-site mock-up with this company to install the largest application to date of their algae-based carbon negative concrete, and really this was sort of maybe the beginning of a process where we went through with our design team and our construction team to evaluate how this product performs in the real world, in a real winter condition, with real maintenance vehicles driving over it, with, and also, lessons learned around scaling innovations, right? This product, we would be the first customer to use it in New York City and also at the mixed design that we're proposing. And so because it doesn't exist at scale yet, part of the lessons learned is what happens when you're doing a pilot where maybe the mix isn't perfect because you had to bring the truck on site and do it quickly there instead of in a lab environment in a manufacturing facility. And I think I wanted to sort of, after 1 year of it, we recently published our sort of technical findings report, as well as I guess you'd call it a blog post or a white paper, some highlighting some of the takeaways. And I don't know what Cedars Digital is actually. I hope they're good company. But I just want to highlight the comment that they left. And I think somebody recently put a similar comment on one of the posts, that the partnership structure here to implement a pilot like this is really the interesting part. And unless all of the partners that we are bringing together come together, these innovations often end up failing on the spectrum of like getting from pilot to planet. And so I think it was really, really fun and interesting to document what that collaboration sort of looked like, how that process was. And I hope it's transferable to other projects, and I hope, we can have, I think I recently heard the term projects that are first of many. So I hope we are a project that's the first of many. And I think with that, maybe this was the last slide, right? Yeah, we can probably open it up to questions, or I'll pass it back to Tristan.
Thank you, Alfmina, Allison, Angela. That was extremely informative. I really appreciate the insights and kind of lessons learned you worked in to your presentation. There's a couple of questions in the chat that I'd love to pass on to you. Grace is curious to hear more about your approach to true zero waste. Were there any big moves you found to be most impactful? Anything that surprised you through the pursuit?
I can take this one unless others would want to. Grace, this is a great question, and we should just do a whole presentation on true waste. I think the not so sexy thing about waste is that it's not necessarily the innovations that work, or I feel like the best practices that work are still working. And I think that's the case that we found with the campus. We had 3 waste rooms. We had each building had its own waste room. The convening hall had all of the items that we were collecting, and then the north building actually had just a storage, and then it would be collected and moved over to our main waste storeroom over in Liggett. And there's like different things of like what's the time that it takes for people to move. We really tried to call, instead of saying waste, we were like waste resources, because we want to like try to of course true waste is 95% diversion. So we had a lot of conversations with the island, the Trust of Governors Island, in order to they're currently picking up bags of trash and throwing them in a back of a pickup and then taking it to their site and loading it by hand. So we would be the first tenant on the island that demanded a little bit more. And so we were collaborating with them of like, could you guys get like an electric garbage truck in order to serve the island? So it's not there's not a lot of innovation there, but I think the innovation was like I guess the other thing I will say is the residence hall. if you have students moving out every semester, we have a share hub that we put into Liggett Hall where folks could leave things that they could use the next semester. We really thought about, okay, systems furniture within each of the rooms, so that they didn't have to bring so much of their own stuff. It could be provided for them, and then there wouldn't be so much turnover. We have also like a little repair section in our, I think it was the laundry room, so that people could be repairing their stuff while on the island. So again, we just don't have them like throwing it away and buying new items from the lovely website of Amazon. So there was a lot of intention there. Again, we are on an island, so like, how do you get things back and forth? How do we support the students and not bringing so much?
Thanks for that answer. And you've got some help here from Tia in the chat, who wants to, the True Team wants to collaborate with you. And do you want to mention the Oyster Project?
Yes, we. What do we want to know? Doing great work. Yeah. So one of the cool things about LBC is that there's a requirement for a charrette to be done. We actually invited all of the tenants, including the school that's on island, Billy and Oyster. There is waste matter. What's
Earth matter?
Earth matter. Thank you. I was like, it's something. Earth matter. We had the Trust of Governor's Island arborist there. We had an operations person there. So we had probably a 30, maybe even 40. I remember ordering the food for this on island. And we talked about, okay, what is the design of our building? How do we make sure that it enmeshes within what is already established, the historical like relevance, and it works with Billy and Oyster, as well as the school, and how can we interact with the gallery that's on site, incorporated within the design of the building. That's a lot to say. We've had a lot of conversations with on-island people. The other thing I will say is that our waterfront edge, we are installing these boxes, these really cool oyster boxes, that Billy and Oyster will come and they will place the oysters on them. I've like learned so much about the larvae to where they have to grow in the tanks. And then anyway, this is a long story to say that Billy and Oyster will include some of their oysters within our waterfront. You won't be able to see them because oysters need full water. They're buried pretty low. So, and they'll have like a monitoring site there to do research on how oysters do in the buttermilk channel along our site.
Very cool. Okay, we've got several more questions that came in. I want to go back to Kunal, who asked, climate data and urban resilience are two of your core pillars. How does the exchange plan to reconnect early stage researchers and data innovators with city agencies or other partners to pilot solutions in real world urban environments?
Yeah, thank you, Tristan, for that. I actually wanted to see if my colleague here, John, would be comfortable speaking to that. I know a lot about our capital project, but I think he probably knows more about this one than I do.
I'm happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is John. I'm the Director of Data Innovation at the New York Climate Exchange. It's a great question. We've established about a year ago, the equipment arrived for something called the Governor's Island Environmental Observatory. And so this is working with research partners and government entities. So the two halves of your questions, Kunal, to have access to, hyper-local, which is to say, New York Harbor-based atmospheric environmental data. We're still building it out. It's obviously not on a building right now. It's in about I think it's like a quarter shipping container. You can see it. We haven't made the data available just yet, but we fully intend it to be an outpost of publicly available data, hopefully to at some point involve marine-based data, which is being captured at the school there, but is not part of this little pod. such that this is a public feed of real-time data that can be built upon with documented APIs and things like that. So that's our attempt to be not just a container for doing things, as cool as it is, but kind of broadcasting out as an early or an observatory, as it's called, of what's going on in the harbor.
That's amazing. Thank you, John.
Sure.
You talked a lot in this presentation about mass timber and this was an area where you could really make a difference as a project. There's a question in the chat about sort of how can you make those wins that future mass timber projects can build on, or are they gonna have to relitigate it?
Yeah, I guess I wanted to kick us off, and then Allison, I see you maybe also had something to respond with here. I think that it's an ongoing studio. We were cohort 2. There was a cohort 1 before us that did sort of some groundwork that we built on. I think, at times our team was definitely frustrated that things aren't moving as quickly as we would like, and that we have to like continue having, repetitive conversations with regulators. But I think we were reminded time and time again that that is what change management is. When you want to make change at a large scale, at a more holistic, sort of with a more holistic approach, you have to work through it iteratively. And I think, some of the things that we identified as challenges, they still remain outstanding. We haven't resolved everything yet. We're still thinking through how to price into our budget, the unknowns that are coming with the mass timber construction in New York City. But, that being said, I know that the regulators are also taking in this information because they actually, updated the code once before after the first cohort. So I think it's all part of the process, and you just have to go through it to arrive at the other side.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think Ivan, it's your question that it just depends on when the project pulls the permit of what has been codified in code or not. So it's a maybe, depending on when they permit their project.
Thanks. Okay, another question. This one from Wendy. How do you see the climate exchange helping create collaborative environments where owners, suppliers, researchers, investors can collectively de-risk innovation and accelerate adoption, with the context that procurement processes and policies and what can be lag way behind new innovators in the market, I think?
I can take this one. I think it's twofold, Wendy. It's how we're building our campus, like for the example of Prometheus, of like, let's de-risk, let's work with Skanska to figure out how we can advocate for a concrete manufacturer to close down one of their entire lines and make the right design for Prometheus, and then start mass producing that. If we can do that, like that advocacy, and we show the exchange and Skanska, I will say, paid for the mock-up, and because these companies that are in R&D like Prometheus just don't have that kind of capital. Of course, they can do grants, but again, this is like part of their mission, and so that's the one side. The other side is like the actual campus has research labs, has demonstration labs beyond the classroom. So that will be like an incubation space for these climate solutions to come to fruition. And then the exchange will really help them and bring all of the different parties that need to de-risk the product to the table through their industry reach at this point.
And I think here I also want to shout out, the Trust for Governors Island. That's the, government entity that controls and operates the island. And they have really set the tone for the island to be a place where real world data on your innovation can be sort of the thing that you test for. So I think they have built the foundation for this, and we are sort of, taking it to the next level with them.
And last, I know we're over time, but one last thought that I'll add is, obviously we're independent of the exchange and working on just this project, but I think the same kind of efforts can apply moving forward. Like speaking to Allison's point about the Prometheus concrete pilot, like what we're, actively trying to do is like targeted industry outreach to really increase awareness and interest, like in this product, but also like other products, right? And really like engaging with like plant operators to familiarize them with the product because like their involvement is obviously so critical to achieving like consistent quality control and supporting all of the required testing that we need to do. And so their input is really critical to scaling this work. So doing it for this project, but obviously lessons learned can be put in place for future development. So.
Thank you so much. And there was a comment in the chat that I sort of took issue with the tone of, but I think there's an important question here about scale of the project and the height, and what that the impact of that on the environment for the public. And Elfmina, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think I responded in the chat, but I just was gonna say that I agree with Roger's point in general about being site sensitive in construction and not, parachuting in a giant thing into some place that doesn't make sense. I think our design is very, very respectful and also inspired by the surrounding public park, by the sort of design language that already exists on the island, especially on the southern portion of it that's not the historic district, because we are not on the historic district. That's the whole reason we can develop that land parcel. I think the other thing I was going to say is that, we were very thoughtful and we still wanted Liggett Cupola, that point, to be the highest point on the island. So I think there's a give and take. You also want to not build on an island that's surrounded by the ocean, without going high with the sort of design flood elevation. So maybe things look larger because they're on a hill. I don't know. I think it's a lengthy conversation we could have about all design considerations when it comes to building something new in a place that already has a character.
Thank you, Alpina. I think that's very well put in terms of the tensions you're dealing with. Well, huge thanks. I've seen a lot of appreciation from the audience. I've found this incredibly informative and inspiring. So huge thanks to Angela Giraldi of Skanska, Allison Crossley of Cumming, Alfmina Mizrahi of the New York Climate Exchange for joining us today. Your time is really worth it while in terms of helping other practitioners advance their work. Thank you. My name is, again, Tristan Roberts. I've been hosting as part of MetroCore, the new online community for sustainability practitioners, where we share lessons learned like this to help everyone advance their work. I'll be sharing more about that in the follow-up, and you're welcome to join and take part. Thanks again for a wonderful panel, and everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan.